Welcome to Parev-TV. Our guest is Dr. David Zakarian, who has been recently appointed as the Haig and Isabel Berberian Professor of Armenian Studies at California State University in Fresno. Dr. Zakarian, thank you very much. Shach Noragalim for this aritin, so we can have a chance to talk to you and learn more about Armenian studies in Fresno and around the world. Let me get with the first question. You teach Armenian language, literature, history, and art. Your mission, I think, is to help inspire a new generation of students to explore and appreciate our rich culture. And I have to confess, very little is known about Armenian studies. What is the state of Armenian studies these days? What can you tell us about the students and the programs?
Thank you very much for having me. Well, you're raising a very interesting question. I would say Armenian studies are doing well around the world. We have quite a few chairs of Armenian studies, both in the US, several of them in the US, in very prestigious universities, and the same is in Europe. So I would say we're doing quite well in that respect. Of course, it's a developing discipline, and we're trying to do our best to engage as many other partners as well, so that we could share our research and work together collaboratively with other disciplines. I could say a little bit about Fresno and the Armenian Studies program here, perhaps. So I moved here from the University of Oxford, where I was a student, a master's student, and then a doctoral student, and then a British Academy postdoctoral fellow for a while. And I taught at the university classical Armenian history and lectured. And then this opportunity came up at Fresno, and this is one of the most prestigious chairs of Armenian studies. Before me, we had Professor Tigran Kuyumjan, who was the first chair of Armenian studies, and then Professor Sergio Laporta, and I'm the third in this row. So, but the Armenian Studies program, the soul of the Armenian Studies program is, of course, Professor Barlo Dermugerdichan, who has been at the university for 40 years already, and his contribution is immense. He managed to develop this program into what the university officials say the jewel of the university, because we have a very vibrant program. We have lectures every semester, quite a few lectures, invited guest speakers who come and share their research with us. And it's open to public. You know, Fresno has one of the largest Armenian populations here in the United States, and it's very it's quite vibrant, and it's really nice to see so many people attending these lectures. And we are talking about people of different age and backgrounds, and they're really interested in this. But it is also something that we do at the university, trying to promote the Armenian studies, Armenian history and culture. So we have several courses at different levels that students can take, and they can explore both the language, history, culture, everything that you mentioned. So the program is alive, and it's vibrant as ever. And what you said about the Armenian studies around the world. So one of the things that is now the world, it's a globalized world, and it's much easier nowadays through Zoom and other media to communicate and organize events with people across the planet. And this kind of facilitated a little bit the collaboration with other partners. So, and in that sense, we are trying to build on what we already have in all these chairs of Armenian studies, and work a little bit more with others, with other disciplines, because we can't keep Armenian studies isolated. It's not just the history of Armenia and Armenian culture. It has never been an isolated discipline, because we lived in a community which interacted with their neighbors, which gave something and took something from those neighbors. So we have lots of influences, and this is kind of the way forward, to try and build up more bridges with other disciplines and try to go forward from there.
You know, you bring out the question, the fact that it's a globalized world we live in. Are there any contemporary issues that Armenia faces that are incorporated in your syllabi?
Well, one of the things that Armenia faces is, of course, the fake narratives that are constantly promoted by some parties, and I think this is quite well known. And one of the one of the responsibilities that the Armenian studies programs around the world have is to try and counter this narrative with factual evidence, and try to provide the accurate information, something that for an outsider, it's like they take whatever they hear. So it's our job as well to constantly track down this sort of narratives, especially if they are done at a very high level, and try to confront it with actual truth and evidence. So that's definitely one of the things. I mean, for years it has been related to the Armenian genocide, when there were different ways of trying to build the narrative of denialism, and this has been done for years. And the Armenian studies programs that taught the genocide were doing a great job trying to confront this. This is unfortunately an ongoing struggle. It's going to continue. So we need to be alert and to do our research, do our solid research, so that we could present this to the world and counter all these fake narratives.
You know, you're very well informed, and you know that in the diaspora, there are many individuals, institutions that try to promote Western Armenian as opposed to the Eastern Armenian. And this has been going on for decades. What is your thought about Western Armenian as opposed to Eastern? And what language do you promote at Fresno?
So language-wise, I think Western Armenian is our treasure. I mean, our language is a treasure, and Armenian has different dialects and different forms of expression. And I think Western Armenian is, first of all, we have great culture created in that language, and it would be a big shame to waste it, to squander it. And what we're trying to do at Fresno is trying to promote Western Armenian. Although we know that according to UNESCO is one of the endangered languages, but there are organizations, for example, the Gallus Gulbenkian Foundation in Lisbon, promoting the teaching of Western Armenian. And the Republic of Armenia recently has started talking about bringing it to a higher level, so that it is taught in schools, and that would be a really great idea. We need to preserve that language. This is part of our identity and part of our culture. So it would be a shame not to teach it to children and to teach it to the future generations. And at Fresno, the language classes that we offer are Western Armenian classes.
That's very interesting. The question is there anything in mind that you can share? What is a good way to preserve the language, besides within the Armenian family or local schools, which we don't have that many on the East Coast or whatever?
Well, family, of course, plays a very important role, and I think I'm just thinking about my own family. That the only way that I managed to keep a language alive was, yes, of course, taking my children to the Armenian school every Sunday, driving from Oxford to London as much as we could, as many times as we could, so that they could preserve the language, and the key point that I realized is to make it meaningful for them. So if language is meaningful, if it's a language of communication, of entertainment, of learning something, of enjoying something, then it becomes practical, and the children would love to learn it. So as soon as it becomes meaningful, then it becomes viable, and it will live on. So for that reason, I think we need to have more, for example, interesting TV programs for children, like TV series, maybe some sort of films. That one of the things that I remember using and that was quite effective was watching some Armenian sitcoms in Armenian language. And now I know that in Western Armenian we don't have. I would say I don't know if there is any such program, but it would be great to be able to create something like that and to target different audiences so that it's useful for children, it's funny for them, and children usually learn by playing, by doing something enjoyable. So if we make that experience enjoyable, then we will be able to preserve and carry it on.
That's very, very, very true. Make it more interesting and more people can relate to. You very quickly mentioned studying in England, but you began in Hurastan. You have a very colorful background, and I'd like to know more about it. You've studied in Armenia, in Greece, in England, and in Fresno. Could you give us a quick capsule of what the whole journey that got you to Fresno?
Well, yes, I was born in Soviet Armenia, and then I went to the university in the Republic of Armenia. Unfortunately, in the 90s, the corruption was really ripe there, and it was a very difficult time. And one of the reasons why I left Armenia was the problem that I couldn't continue my studies. It's a whole different story, and I hope one day write a book about that. But it was really sad that it pushed me out. So I moved to Greece. My mother is Greek, so Greece was a destination. I had family there. So I graduated. I did my undergraduate studies in Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and I did a master's course in English language and literature. So it had nothing to do with the Armenian studies, and I even wanted to do a PhD there. But my very wise supervisor, Karen Buckland Lagopoulou, she advised me to try and apply for a PhD in the UK. So with her encouragement, I ended up in Oxford. So I applied for the Armenian Studies program, and it happened just why Armenian Studies, why I changed this. I was writing my master's dissertation in English literature at the University of Cambridge. So I went there for a library visit and did some research there in the library. And I was working with a manuscript there. And I decided, I found out that there is a collection of Armenian manuscripts. So I asked them to bring me I randomly chose one manuscript. I just pointed and I said, okay, this one, just bring me, I want to touch an Armenian manuscript. And I think that was the turning point in my life. Because the first time I held in my hands the manuscript, which you open and you see familiar letters and you see a beautiful handwriting, and it turned out to be a manuscript written by a woman. So she dedicated this manuscript to her brother. It was a collection of Armenian poetry and lots of it was a collection. So that was the moment that I would say the turning point for me. And Oxford University is the only place where you could do Armenian studies in the UK, where we have the Galus Gulbenkian Chair of Armenian Studies. And so I did another master's degree in classical Armenian studies, and then my DPhil, as they call it in Oxford. And my dissertation was on the representation of women in early Christian Armenian texts. So, which later on turned into a book published by Brill in 2021.
That's a very exciting story. Let me also tell our listeners or viewers that I came across your name first time through the book by Dr. Abel Manoukian, the deaconesses of the Armenian church, and you were the one who translated it from Armenian into English. You also have written about women too were blessed, the portrayal of women in early Christian Armenian texts. There's a lot you've done, and congratulations, because that book really, really was a beautiful translation. My question to you, is it as easy to move from Armenian into English as English into Armenian, or is it different worlds and you have to be careful? Which is the easier for you, or in general? How does it work?
In my case, I think I'm quite lucky that from my birth, I was sort of trilingual. I had Armenian, Greek, and Russian. So it was, and then I learned English. English is a learned language for me, and I think that helps a little bit to transition quickly between languages. The only thing is that in you study, you read something in, and you do all your research in one language. And for me, it was English. So my entire academic career was based on reading and writing in English. Of course, I read in all the other languages that I know, but to write, to express my thoughts, I primarily used English. So, and I think I haven't tried to do it the other way around, so from English into Armenian. But I know when I start speaking about my research in Armenian, sometimes I need to think twice for specific terms. Yeah, because we don't. I mean, there are terms, the translation of certain terms, especially some modern scholarly terms. But for me, I would say it's easier from Armenian to English rather than the other way around. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So to bring it to the level.
Interesting. In general, are there more translations from English into Armenian or from Armenian into English? There must be a lot of translations going on.
Well, it depends on what kind of translations you're talking about. So primarily, we're trying to translate in general from Armenian into English to make it more accessible to scholars and to people interested around the world. And I think it's a very important work to be done. So for example, I always say this in Armenian Academy, in the Yerevan State University, in the Academy of Sciences. We have fantastic research that is being done, but most of it is in Armenian. I would say the vast majority of it is in Armenian. And scholars outside Armenia, people who don't have access to Armenian, cannot access it. It's difficult for them, and very often we have in the West some studies published which do not reference any Armenian source just because they couldn't access it. So I think it is important to understand that we have a global world where English is primarily the language of academia. Of course, French is close to it, but not to that degree. So I think it is important to be able to translate, to bring into the English language some of this research that has been done, because there is indeed fantastic research. And I was really very happy when Abel Manukyan asked me to do this work, because I think it is important. He published it in Eastern Armenian and Western Armenian. So it was important to have it in English to make it more accessible to wider audiences.
It was a beautiful translation. Once again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Dr. Zakarian, you are very well aware that the Armenian Church Theological Center was founded in California, ACTS, they call it, and Hırat Çilingirian is heading it. You were invited to one of the meetings. You could not make it. But my question is, the church is trying to bridge religion with the faithful. You, as a professor, are trying to bridge the culture and language with the students. What are the challenges we're facing in realizing these dreams? How successful are you in bridging the culture with the younger generation? Everybody seems to have the same problem.
The challenges, of course, are there. We need to recognize that, and we need to try different ways of approaching younger people. I think the world is changing in a way that we need to be able to follow that pace. So what is important, I think, again, making it relevant to them, making it in their head to build the connection between the past and the present.
Yeah.
So, for example, my research on women, when I started doing that research, I had absolutely no agenda in my mind. I was thinking, okay, let me see how we speak about our golden age of Armenian literature. So how the greatest figures of that century presented women. So my plan was just to approach it and to figure out whether they were misogynistic or not. So I didn't know. I wanted to find out. So and then I realized that research, despite the fact that it's a text of the 5th century, it's quite relevant to today as well, because we see that the church had a completely different approach to women as compared to what we see today, unfortunately. If you read these 5th century texts, and this is something that we should refer to as our tradition, first of all, because for some reason there are misconceptions about what is an Armenian tradition. And very often the patriarchal values are presented as our tradition. However, if you look at one simple example that I bring, in the 5th century, we had a synod of the Armenian Church, the Shah Ivan Council, 444. And if you look at the canons that the Church Council adopted at the time, they put men and women on the same scale. They did not treat women worse than men. They, for example, for the same punishment, for the same crime, they gave the same punishment. If you compare the same thing with the neighboring traditions, that wasn't the case. Women were always punished more harshly. But the Armenian church and the Armenian community, because that was a community event as well, it wasn't just the church itself, they came with these canons that did not distinguish between men and women. Well, if you commit a crime, you're punished in the same way. The only difference was the class thing. So if you belong to the upper class, then you're not punished as severely. But if we speak about the issues of gender in that case, so the church and the community had a different approach. So this is, I think, something from the 5th century that we can take on when we speak about the Christian Armenian tradition and build on it. So these texts are relevant today as well. So what I'm trying to do with my students is I'm trying to show this relevance. I'm trying to show not only that, okay, this is what we had in the 5th century, but then going on forward, I'm talking about, for example, the Armenian, rich Armenian heritage that has been destroyed, is being destroyed currently as well. And this is one of the ways to try and erase Armenians from the historical Armenia. So again, what churches were built, for example, and monasteries were built in the 9th, 10th century, they're relevant to today as well, because that's part of this struggle that we face against rewriting of history and the denial of the Armenian existence there. So again, bringing the old history, bringing the Armenian culture that existed to today, make it relevant. That makes things interesting for people. And of course, I also try to connect it to the realities that we have here today. For example, if you speak about the Armenian genocide, you mentioned the communities. Why, for example, we have Armenian communities around the world. So it is, again, the meaningful connection that I try to build to make it relevant to students.
You know, you spoke about Barlo Dermagerdician, and you mentioned him as the soul of Armenian studies. I think that whole Armenian studies is in good hands with you. You'll make sure that that soul remains polished and bright. I really, really believe it. That passion I feel with your British accent is really something very unique. Գիտեք, ովևէ ժամանակ, որ այսպես հարցազրույց կվարենք, մարդիկ կքանքադին, գսեն այսպեսի պրոֆեսորի հետ խոսիկ հայագիտական ամբիոնի դնորեն եւ ինչու հայերեն չեք խոսիր, ուրեմն եթե գրնակ փակման խոսք մնել հայերենի եւ նամանավանդ կարեւորությունը պաշտպանելու, զարգացնելու արմատյան հայերենը.
Երբ ես դպրոցում սովորում էի, մենք գրականության դասերին շատ էինք կարդում արևմտահայերեն բանաստեղծություններ։ Եվ հենց այդ ժամանակվանից ես շատ սիրեցի լեզվի հնչեղությունը։ Մի հրաշալի լեզու է, որով կարելի է կարդալ, լսել, հիանալ պոեզիայով։ Մեր Արենց, Դուրյան, Սիամանթո եւ դա մեր հարստությունն է, դա մեր ազգային հարստությունն է եւ այդ տարանջատումը իհարկե պատմականորեն է ձևավորվել, բայց ես կարծում եմ, որ մենք պարտադիր պետք է պահենք եւ Հայաստանի Հանրապետությունում եւ Սփյուռքում եւ պետք է զարգացնենք դպրոցները, որտեղ այդ լեզուն դասավանդվում է եւ ինչպես ես ասացի, պետք է դարձնել այդ լեզուն օգտագործելու լեզու, որը ինչ որ մի նպատակ ունի, լեզու, որը երեխաները կարողանան օգտագործել ինչ որ մի բնագավառում եւ այդ ժամանակ երբ որ արդեն գիտակցաբար դա օգտագործեն մենք կարողանանք պահպանել այդ լեզուն իհարկե պետք է աջակցել հայկական դպրոցներին եւ արևելահայերեն դասավանդող եւ արևմտահայերեն եւ պետք է կարողանալ այդ լեզվի միջոցով մեր հարուստ մշակույթը փոխանցել ապագա սերունդներին
Dr. David Zakarian, we really appreciate your time. Obviously, this is a very difficult topic to discuss in 20 minutes or so. This requires a lot of study, but at least you give us some idea of what to do. And congratulations on your position. I'm sure the whole Armenian studies will be fortunate as a major asset they've got in you. Congratulations and good luck and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Շատ շնորհակալ եմ, շատ շնորհակալ եմ։
Շնորհակալություն։
Հաջողություն։